Hey everybody, and welcome back to Vestanland. This is episode 7, and in this episode, the main thing I do is build this central train station for the city. Before I get to that, I had to go through and replace some of the roads on the parts of the city that are closer to where I'm going to build a train station. For this, I used these blank roads from the workshop and intersection marking tool. These are super cool because it gives you a ton of ability to customize the way your roads look. And I went through and created this road with 2 car lanes each direction and then a 2-way cycle track on the eastern side, I guess it was what it would be. What's nice about this is you can just copy and paste the markings from one segment to the next, so you can get a consistent look for all the same types of roads, and this saves a ton of time, which is really nice. I also used intersection marking tool to place down trees in the median of these roads, which is another really crucial detail for adding it just makes it look really good. It's hard to find a different word for it than that. Again, we can get the spacing consistent. You can add even like some shrubs on the bottom to create a little more visual interest, and then place them down and copy and paste to other segments along the road, and it ends up getting a really nice effect. I also placed down the tram track on the outside of the road parallel to it, but not within the median as I had it previously. I think this is important. It's going to be important for managing traffic flow and having the tram so they can run outside of the car traffic. I think that'll be useful just going forward. After that, I moved on to detailing some of the intersections, and this is similar to how I detailed the segments, where you can copy and paste the same format and place it down in other intersections that have the same layout, so you can get a consistent look between different areas of the city. I also ended up relocating where the tram connected to a less busy street, and I think that'll set us up for building the actual station a little bit better, because that'll allow me to place a tram stop right in front of it, which will sort of help form the beginnings, at least, of a sort of transit hub right in the center of the old historic city. Talking a little more about the plans for the future station. You'll see it in a minute how I actually end up setting it up, but my plan is for this to have sort of be like a multimodal type place where there's a lot of different transit services all kind of converging at one location, and that includes trains eventually, and all the tram network that I sort of have the very early stages of. Building out, just sort of detailing this little area, even though there's no buildings here right now, no one's really using it. It still will allow me, give me at least a better idea of this station that I'm about to start building right now. To do this, I'd sort of deleted the placeholder train tracks that I had there before, and I started playing around with these modular train station buildings, and they're based on the central train station from Malmö, Sweden. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, so I apologize. But it's a major city in Sweden, right on the coast, close to Denmark. And these assets were really nice on the workshop, and I really like the idea of having a modular setup where I could sort of mix and match different pieces of the same station together, so it would be cohesive, but I could also create something that was pretty unique, and I think I was able to do that here. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, and I'll still be adding more to it in the future. I wasn't able to finish it in this episode, so there'll be more to come from this station. For example, in terms of, this goes back to something I was talking about with scale in the city. Obviously, I'm trying to create a realistic city, but sometimes that means not being able to have the same scale as you would see in a real life station. For example, like a big central terminal station like this might have like 2 or 3 times as many platforms as this station does, with 5. But I think that's okay, because as long as I detail it up nicely, I can still get a good effect, and it'll still look really realistic, which is all that I'm really going about. Same thing goes for the scale of the rail yard that I'm kind of starting to form here on screen. Again, there'd be a lot more tracks in real life, and it would probably take up a lot more space, but if I want to create sort of a whole country like this series is based on, then I have to squish some things down. But luckily there are ways to do that, and there's sort of tricks that you can use to make that possible. There's a lot of trial and error involved in splicing together these buildings. I cut out most of it from the footage, mainly because this episode would be 2 or 3 hours long if I kept it all in. But yeah, I was constantly readjusting and kind of splicing these buildings together, and I settled on something I think looks pretty cool with this kind of old brick facade on 2 sides of the building, and then kind of the main train hall kind of stretching out behind it. These buildings aren't necessarily train station buildings in-game in terms of functionality, so I will probably have to place down some block services and other stuff within the station to kind of get them to function as I want them to. But they look really nice, and they function right now as Rico buildings, so they have like offices and commercial and stuff like that in there, which kind of makes sense for a train station. There would be a lot of people working there, obviously, so there should be plenty of activity in this area. Another example of some of the future plans are just this area I'm kind of marking off with surface painter. It's going to be kind of a big plaza right in front of the station that I'll kind of get to later on, and not in this episode, but later on in the series. Going back to the other side of the station on the rail yard, this is where I started detailing, and this is one of those things where there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of sort of mixing and matching different things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily think of as being part of what you're building, but it kind of, you figure it out and you figure out what works. With this fence, I don't know, it looks like it fits the area nicely, and that's kind of just the main thing that I have to be concerned about. I sort of extended the fences out to like mark off kind of the area that I was going to focus on detailing, because obviously this extends a lot farther. And one thing that I did first of all was to extend these platforms out. I was looking at Google Earth. I saw a lot of stations have platforms that kind of extend outside of the main building, and you'll see it later, but they oftentimes have like these shelters over them to protect people from the rain, weather, and stuff like that. I started placing these down. I changed the color of these because I thought it was a little too bold for this particular place. But these extended platforms also give me a chance to add some more station detailing that'll be a little more visible, as opposed to stuff that's kind of hidden within the station itself. And it also just creates a little bit more interest, especially when I kind of have these it's kind of a staggered look where like the platforms, you can see the end of the platform, then the end of the shelter, then the actual building. Just kind of looks a lot more interesting, at least in my opinion. Now I'm starting to place down these catenaries, which are used to hold up the wires. Obviously not functionally in the game, the wires are there by themselves, but in terms of realism, this is something you see in a lot of rail yards. I took a lot of, I'm using the props from the Railway 2 collection on the Scene Workshop. A lot of these are by Ronix or Revo, and they obviously make a ton of great stuff, and these are no different. There's a ton of different options. I think I ended up picking the German ones, or at least like ones that are based on the German standard, because I think they sort of fit the best for whatever reason. After I kind of placed those down, really some of them, I started placing on these shrubs and grass. It's not something I really thought of as being important necessarily, but looking at Google Earth again, I saw a ton of these kind of scrubby areas with vegetation in these rail yards. So I decided to place them down. I now start placing down these platform props, like benches and other stuff, to kind of fill out these platform areas and give them sort of a more realistic look. It'll be nice to see like people actually walking around here waiting for trains, because that's kind of what will really tie things together. But for now anyway, the trash cans and the benches and stuff like that are they do the trick for right now. And as I was saying earlier, I'm mainly focusing on the actual outside of the building, like the part that you can see without zooming in, just because I think that's the most visible and kind of the most important to focus on for creating the look that I'm going for. I also placed down some fences on the ends of these platforms, even though I didn't see many of them in kind of like my research that I was doing. It seemed weird to me that there wouldn't be a fence of some kind to stop people from running into where all the wires and trains are. So I figured that would be good to have for safety purposes. while I'm finishing up some of this rail yard detailing by placing down all these like decals and stuff, I ask if you're enjoying the video and you're enjoying the series so far, consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. It helps me out a lot, and it means a lot to see people supporting this content. So I enjoy making it, and it's nice to know that people enjoy watching it. Back to what's going on in the video. These bushes, I kind of ended up placing down kind of too many at the beginning, mainly ones that are too big. And this goes back to what I was discussing earlier with getting the scale right. I ended up deleting the bigger ones, just leaving the smaller bushes, and that kind of just like makes the rail yard appear a lot bigger than it would otherwise, which is nice. Especially, because I'm trying to make this rail yard bigger than it actually is, in terms of how it appears. So that was an important thing that I kind of, again, goes back to the theme of trial and error in this episode. Once I deleted the biggest of the shrubs and I had the smaller ones, it looked a lot better. And to finish off at least this part of the detailing, I placed down some light poles to add a little more realism. And this is something that's it's kind of just helpful in terms of creating a really cool effect, because they got like shadows, they kind of cast a shadow, and they kind of, since they're so tall, they kind of like break up the different planes of what you're seeing in the rail yard, so it kind of adds a lot. After I was done with that, I moved inside the station, and in here I'm not going to do a ton of detailing just because it's not very visible from outside. But I did figure I had to do some just to make it look like an actual station, so just a big empty room. So I added some doors. I added these little like backstop things at the end of the train tracks. And I also added some ceiling light props, which were nice just to illuminate the space. This station, it looks like it has some really cool skylights on it. It's unfortunate they don't have any effect where they actually let the sunlight through, because that would have been ideal for this, but it doesn't. And this was the best station I could find for other reasons. So unfortunately, I had to use some artificial lights to lighten up the space. This goes back again with what I was talking about earlier in terms of trial and error, in terms of finding different props to kind of fit the vibe that I'm going for. It can be kind of challenging sometimes, but eventually, it's sort of, they all come together at the end. And in this particular situation, I'm not as worried about using props from different countries or that have the wrong languages or whatever on them, mainly because this isn't going to be super visible. I'm the only one who's going to see it. So I'm sort of okay with that. I'm okay with cutting corners a little bit. Obviously, it'd be nice if I had either the ability to make my own props, or had somebody who could make them for me, but I don't right now. Maybe in the future I will, and that'll be really cool to get some customized props and signs and stuff like that. But for now, we're using generic ones, or ones that are German or Japanese or whatever. It works for the time being anyway. This is one thing that I did. I'm not sure how I feel about. Eventually, I want to have this function as a metro station also, and to do that, I needed to have some kind of way for people to get from a below ground station up to the level of the surface train tracks. And to do this, I needed some stairs that kind of went through the platform. And I'm using these props that I believe are from Japanese railways to create this effect. Obviously, these aren't functional right now. And you can see the surface kind of poking through, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, that's kind of, eventually I'm going to try to have people walking through those, and I eventually use procedural objects to kind of sort of just obscure the platform texture. And yeah, we'll see how that works. I might have to rework that in a future episode. This is what I was talking about with the procedural objects, and just turning this concrete block to black and then kind of fitting it into this stairway area. And obviously it's not perfect, but it's sort of, if you're just looking at it from the outside, you wouldn't be able to notice that there's not actually anything there, and it's just kind of a void. But yeah, there could be, eventually, maybe people will be able to walk through that black abyss and catch a train from the metro, which would be really cool to see. talking more about what I've kind of been just alluding to throughout the episode. Episode 8 will be sort of a part 2 or follow-up to this one, and it'll basically focus on turning this from a train station to a main transit hub with the metro below and the sort of regional rail on top, and the tram also connecting to the outside with a sort of a large pedestrian area in front of it. So subscribe to the channel if you're interested in following along with that. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Vestanland, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.